Alright, let's have a look at this really quick. I got the rest of the car out, since we got the engine out already and pulled the fuel tank. And I was trying to get some power transfer out of this gearbox again. I'm still not getting anything. And while I was messing with this, I actually ended up breaking the servo horn off of the forward reverse selector servo. Well, there's really no big deal. Like I said, we're probably going to end up eliminating that feature anyway. I noticed when I was underneath here that, well, it uses 8 Phillips screws. You see those screw holes there that they would go in. One of the screws for the transmission is missing, leading me to believe that the transmission's been removed. And I'm seeing this kind of like crusty, grayish white crap all over everything down inside there, and that's coming out of the outdrive holes. So I was wondering, like, what that might be about exactly. Then I open this up. This is where you're supposed to tune the shift points for your transmission, and have a look there. So the gearbox is completely blobbed up with what looks like lithium grease. So you're not supposed to use lubricants on the inside of these gearboxes besides just like light surface lubricants. This one's jammed up with lithium grease, which is now hardened inside of the gearbox, and that's what's hanging up the gearbox. So again, we're going to pull the transmission. I'm going to take all the secondaries and tertiaries and everything off of it, disconnect the drivetrain, and get the transmission pulled. And there we have it. The transmission is out. The transmission gearbox is out of the old Dirty South T-Maxx. The drive shafts don't articulate very well at all. You can see here that there's a great deal of, maybe it can be cleaned up. Maybe it's just buildup. There's that grease that was coming out of the gearbox. The front differential is very rough action. So the front differential is probably going to have to be rebuilt also. And that kind of explains why the bulkhead might be missing, or the skid plate in the front and the bulkhead brace, because the previous owner had planned on doing the repairs to that front diff and just never got around to it. I did have to use a screw extractor on one of these screws because the heads of the Phillips screws were trashed that were holding in the gearbox, so it was actually very difficult to get it out. When the truck is reassembled, I'll be replacing a lot of this hardware with hex, so that in the future, if I have to do any maintenance or take anything apart, I won't have those problems again. On to this guy. Now that we have it pulled, we can take a look here and kind of see what we're up against. And like we addressed earlier, it's got a lot of crap going on here. This is looking pretty bad. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Phillips screws, which again will be replaced with hex before this is over with. I'm not anticipating this is going to be easy. But once those are out, this thing kind of breaks in half along the seam where the screws are at, and we can kind of diagnose what's going on inside here. My goodness. All right. We got this opened up, folks, and have a look here. I was kind of wondering why, I mean, it's been a while since I pulled one of these things out, but I was wondering why it seemed to weigh twice as much as I remember these transmissions weighing. And that has an awful lot to do with all this grease we're seeing in here. So let me grab this really quick and just have a look at the level of just grease that's in here. That's just a little bit right there. I mean, it comes all the way down around here. It's just around the outside of the transmission gears. It's like, needless to say, there's no working around this. I can't even diagnose what might be wrong inside here with all this grease. None of this is ever supposed to be like this. So I guess it's time to just see if I can pull this apart and find anything. And in the meantime, it's going to be a real deep clean on it. This is just absolutely disgusting. Alright, now this is giving us a little bit of problems right here. So I'm just going to grab our little punch block again. Alright, there's our input right there. So now, this side of the case is pretty much empty. We'll have a look at the other side of the case. This is the, you have your engagement section for the forward and reverse, so I am going to have to pull this after all to get this out. And then that's your forward, reverse, actual selector gears. I see the idler gear in there. Maybe once this stuff is cleaned up a little bit, we can figure out what's hanging it up. And we're just still plugging away on this. I mean, I got this side of the case cleaned out a little bit to the point now it's ready for its deep clean. I don't know if you've ever seen anything like this. I haven't, and there's no reason to, because it's absolutely ridiculous. So we're going to go ahead and keep getting this cleaned out. The inside of these things has a lot of like clutch action and centrifugal action going on, where parts need to achieve friction against the insides or outsides of other parts in order to transfer power. We'll see exactly what's going on as we get this grease off and get into it, but needless to say, that being the requirement of the way that this thing operates, packing it completely full of grease is not the best idea. It's not going to work, and it's probably eventually going to damage something. So hopefully by the time we go through this, we get everything checked out and get it put back together. Who knows? Maybe it'll work. I'll keep at it. Here's the main drive transmission assembly out of the transmission, like the actual 2-speed part. This pawl here was absolutely soaked in that grease that we had gone through earlier, and that kind of made me concerned about it, so I wanted to disassemble this and kind of see where we're at with it. Alright, there we go. So that's what the inside of that's going to look like. I see there's an awful lot of grease in there. I want to try to degrease the outer walls on the gear and degrease the pawl. Squirt some of that in there and let it do its magic. Man, that was aggressive, wasn't it? Alright. Hopefully that'll kind of bust some of that stuff up. I'll Q-tip it off and it'll be ready to go for the reassembly. Now there's everything we're going to need, hopefully, to get into this transmission and start putting it back together. There's everything that's in there. We got replacement parts right here. Here's the old primary drive. You can see that Robinson spur gear and the old 20-tooth clutch bell. That bearing that's in the clutch bell is frozen in place. It doesn't move. That doesn't really matter that much because over here we have a new 24-tooth clutch bell that we're going to be using when we do the reinstallation. The forward-only kit is right over here. You see that gear there in the little box. And that's everything that's eliminated by the installation of the forward-only kit. I finally broke down and got myself a parts box. You can see the screws there that I'm sorting out to replace things with hex as we go for the reassembly. Right here is going to be our slipper clutch discs. And you can see that on the Robinson gear, the slipper clutch was over-tightened quite a lot. That's also evidenced by the look of this lock nut that's right over there on the right. The guts of the lock nut are just popping right out of it. You can see marks on the slipper clutch discs where the little slipper pads or slipper pegs that are installed in there were just cranked down to the absolute max. I can respect the fact that, like, we're going to be putting in a plastic spur gear, so that'll be our failure point. The old Robinson spur gear, as cool as it is, it's just too big of a spur gear, and the pinion was too small for the motor that we're putting in here. And just to kind of illustrate that point, I made this chart. The Max 2.5, which is obviously what this truck was, is running a 20-tooth bell and a 72-tooth spur for a 3.6 to 1 gear ratio. You can see the stock gear ratios there with the 22 and 58 combo is a 2.6 to 1 for the long wheelbase stock 3.3 transmission. Our project down there, highlighted in pink, the new installation is going to be a 24-tooth bell with a 70-tooth spur for a 2.9 to 1 ratio on those. So we're kind of meeting it halfway between the stock 2.5 and the stock 3.3 gear ratios. I wanted to rebuild this trans. I've done a lot of motor swaps in these, and even though the 3.3's transmission is a better transmission all the way around, it's more versatile. You have like internal gear changes that you can do for first and second. It's very cool. I've done a lot of motor swaps in these, and the only time I've had an issue with the 2.5's transmission failing was with big blocks. Since we're doing a 3.3 in this one, I think that'll be good. And here's all the literature for the forward-only conversion. So everything's here, everything's laid out, and hopefully we have what we need. So let's get into putting this bad boy back together for a reinstallation into the truck when we're ready. And there we go. We have power transfer through the transmission for the first time. You can see the output drives are actually moving. And when I move the output drives, it's moving the input shaft. This is where the spur gear would be. So it looks like we're on the right track with this. Awesome. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and put back on the out drive. This is the only one that we have to put onto the transmission because the other one we left in the chassis of the truck. It's still connected to the rear diff. There we go. All right. So we want to get this one nice and flush so that the brake disc will slide right over it without causing us any issues. Oh, our little nubbin fell out of there. It's like basically like a brake piston that it uses. Make sure that doesn't fall out, otherwise we'll get everything put back together and the brakes won't work. So we'll go ahead and start this. Then what I like to do is just kind of take out that one there. And start this. Then what I like to do is just kind of take out that one there. Shuffle these up out of the way. The pad's behind it. And the other one out in front. And then the rear pad is going to set right down in there like that in front of that caliper we talked about. Then once you kind of got those sandwiched in there in the way that you like, install the screw for the other side. Feel probably about that. You rotate this, it's moving around, it's having no problem. Then if you pull this, it stops. You rotate this, it's moving around, it's having no problem. Then if you pull this, it stops. See that? Because that's actuating the brake right there. So there we go. Now let's go ahead and plug that up. Don't need to put any grease in there, right? Now, like I said, I sourced hex hardware for all these little bits here. So we can go ahead and get the case put back together. It feels pretty good. It articulates nicely. That's binding a little bit, but it's nothing that I can't fix. Once we get a little further along, we might want to tighten this down a little bit more. That's probably all it is. This brake disc is a little bit worn out, but it wasn't to the point where I really wanted to replace it. All right, that should hold nicely. Now that that's done, we'll just go ahead and pop all these guys back in. Alright, this is the last one, so I'm going to tighten that one down nice and tight. Then kind of alternate to the other side. Do your kind of like modified star pattern and just address all the bolts all the way around the outside of it. It's rotating nicely. It is transferring power. And all the one-way assemblies inside are working. Alright, so the issue now is there were linkages that are supposed to come out of here for the forward-reverse actuation, and this kit came with these screws. I think it's this big boy screw here that's supposed to go in right here, and then it probably has another one to seal the case on the other side. So I'm going to get these installed, and once that's done, this is pretty much, we got our brake working. Power transfer is working for the first time since we've been looking at this. So whatever happened during the rebuild, all the degreasing and fixing stuff up, replacing bearings, it worked. And then you got all this stuff right here that doesn't go in there anymore. So for whatever it's worth, like this is a pretty heavy piece. Some of this stuff is all pretty heavy and it's all part of the rotating assembly in the gearbox. So who knows, man? You know, you might get a little performance advantages out of this. 3.3 gearbox is better, but that necessitates changing out basically everything from the spur gear all the way through the transmission, of course, because it's a new transmission. The drive shaft yokes are different. It changes everything. So for the sake of this build, I thought it would be cool to just go ahead and stick with the 2.5. I've never really had issues with it taking the extra power, like I said, until you start messing with big block stuff. Bell, which we got right here. That'll go on the motor later. You got to do the clutch too, because it's bad. But for this part we got going on right now, we got this 70 tooth spur gear. So we're going to go ahead and install that onto the transmission that we just got done building out. So we got this here. The little collet is here. And like I said, on the old one, everything was pretty messed up. I don't want any adjustability to this slipper clutch. I don't want it to actually slip. So the old lock nut was stripped out. I got a new lock nut. And hopefully there will be enough thread on this input shaft where we can go ahead and put this lock nut over the top of this nut here and create like a jam nut effect. So when we do set it up as tight as I want it, it'll stay that way. There are exactly 12 slipper pegs in here. So we're going to install these into this guy. And there we go. Not even a single extra one. And these would be pretty easy to lose if they fall into that other dimension that exists under everybody's workbench. When you drop parts down there, there's a pretty good chance you'll never see them again. Now we got the faces of these. Like we talked about, these faces are pretty dirty. And since we don't want this to operate, the smoothness isn't really important that much, but I'm going to go ahead and use this emery board to at least file the imperfections and the raised areas off of it that were caused by rubbing on the old slipper pads. It doesn't take much, and this should be like a nice solid setup. So, for starters, we got this guy. Kind of goes onto this hexagonal portion of the transmission's input shaft. And once that's on there, don't forget our little collet. This goes on the gear, and that's how it's going to transfer power to the input shaft when it's under load with the slipper clutch. Man, is that a bastard. Alright, we got that on there. Slip that into place. Again, just like that. And then this guy. It's got a spring too, so the slipper clutch spring obviously is going to be next. And then we're going to test my jam nut idea to see if this is actually going to work. Once you get this clamped down a little bit, you can just hold the spur gear down and the nut will start to engage. The gear is a little bit wonky, but this is something that'll correct itself as the truck runs, and further adjustments to the slipper clutch will be necessary as we go along. And then I'll just put this lock nut up over the top of there, and hopefully that jam nut effect will keep this from moving. I think it should work. We'll see. I've never really tested it before. It's an idea that I had just for this one. Well, that looks pretty good, pretty straight. Definitely close enough for a Traxxas T-Maxx. We're not really doing race car specs here, so look at that great power transfer we're having now. And everything feels so unburdened since all that grease is added there. The pawls are clean, the bearings are replaced. This is like a brand new transmission, and it really feels good.